Welcome back. Take a deep breath, relax, and let the soothing whispers of this story guide you into a world of calm and mystery. Something has been hidden here for centuries, a secret buried deep within this garden. No one has ever uncovered it, but tonight the truth will finally be revealed. Chapter 1. The Invitation. It was a quiet afternoon in St. Mary Mead. The sun filtered through the leafy branches of the old oak trees, casting dappled shadows across the stone path that led to Miss Marple's cottage. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fresh lavender and the warmth of the hearth crackling gently in the corner. Miss Marple sat in her favourite armchair, a cup of chamomile tea cradled in her hands, the soft ticking of the grandfather clock her only companion. She had always been fond of the quietude that came with rural life. Each morning, a sense of calm that slowly wrapped itself around her. The world beyond her little village, with its bustling streets and busy people, always seemed so far away. But today, something felt different. There was a subtle shift in the air, an unspoken invitation that seemed to whisper through the trees, a feeling that this peaceful afternoon would not remain undisturbed. And then, as though the universe had decided to play its hand, there was a soft knock at the door. Miss Marple set her tea aside and slowly rose from her chair, her slippers making no sound on the wooden floor. She opened the door, and there, lying on the doorstep, was a neatly folded letter, its edges slightly worn, as though it had travelled far. Miss Marple bent down, her movements deliberate and careful, as she reached for the letter. Her old fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it, and as her eyes skimmed the carefully penned words, a curious sensation tugged at her chest. The letter was elegant in its simplicity, yet the tone suggested urgency. It read, "Dear Miss Marple, I require your expertise. A puzzle awaits in my garden, one that has stumped even the cleverest minds. I believe only your insight can solve it. Come to Rosewood Manor, where the garden holds secrets yet to be uncovered." The letter was signed only with the cryptic words, "A friend." Miss Marple stood still for a moment, holding the letter close to her chest. There was something oddly compelling about this invitation, a subtle promise of mystery, of something just beyond her grasp. She had lived a life steeped in small-town drama and gentle intrigue, but something in this message stirred a deeper curiosity. A puzzle in a garden, she thought. What could it be? Her mind, sharp as ever despite her years, began to spin with possibilities. Was this some sort of elaborate riddle, or was it something more dangerous, a problem too big for ordinary folk to understand? She couldn't help but wonder why she, of all people, had been chosen for this task. Well, she murmured to herself, a slight smile curling her lips. It seems an afternoon's tea will have to wait. A mystery awaits. She turned and reached for her shawl, its soft wool rustling as she draped it around her shoulders. The steady ticking of the clock seemed to echo louder now, as if urging her to take action. The invitation was clear. The garden, no doubt, held secrets to be uncovered. Miss Marple, with her ever-present sense of duty and curiosity, could not turn away from the challenge. The village itself seemed to hum with an almost imperceptible energy as she closed the door behind her and stepped into the world outside. The air had a crispness to it, a freshness that hinted at the promise of change. It was as though even the wind had caught wind of her impending journey. Miss Marple walked steadily down the familiar path, her steps unhurried but purposeful. As she made her way toward Rosewood Manor, the quiet hum of her surroundings seemed to heighten the anticipation, filling the air with a soft, almost musical rhythm. The gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird blended into a peaceful symphony. But beneath the serenity, a deeper current of something unknown, something unsettling, seeped through the air, drawing her closer to the unknown puzzle that awaited her. The garden at Rosewood Manor was still some distance away, but Miss Marple's thoughts had already begun to wander. What sort of puzzle could it be? A labyrinth of hedges, perhaps, or some hidden message within the garden's design. Whatever it was certain that this was no ordinary challenge. There was something far grander at play, something that had intrigued the sender of the letter enough to seek out her expertise. And that thought, more than any, brought a slow smile to her lips. She may have been a small-town spinster, but there were few mysteries that could outwit her sharp mind. As she approached the gates of Rosewood Manor, the grandeur of the estate loomed before her. The ivy-covered stone walls seemed ancient, their weathered surfaces bearing the marks of time's passage. The garden itself was visible through a wrought-iron gate, a tangle of flowering vines and neatly pruned hedges weaving together in what appeared to be a carefully crafted maze. But it was not the beauty of the garden that held Miss Marple's attention. It was the feeling of stillness that seemed to hang in the air, a heaviness that settled over the estate like a veil. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. She pushed open the gate, its creak breaking the silence, and stepped onto the stone path that led deeper into the garden. The stone was cool beneath her feet, the scent of fresh flowers and earth filling her senses. Yet, beneath all the tranquility, there was a sense of waiting, an undercurrent of expectation that had been building ever since she received the letter. And as she walked deeper into the garden, she could not shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her, waiting for her to uncover whatever secrets the garden had kept hidden for so long. The invitation had brought her here, and now she would solve the puzzle. Chapter 2. Rosewood Manor. The air was thick with the scent of roses as Miss Marple approached the gates of Rosewood Manor. The old iron gates creaked open slowly, as though welcoming her into the very heart of the mystery she had been invited to solve. The garden lay ahead, an oasis of nature tucked away behind stone walls draped in ivy. The peaceful silence of the manor contrasted with the ever-growing sense of curiosity building in Miss Marple's mind. Rosewood Manor was as grand as it was mysterious, its grey stone facade bathed in the soft afternoon sunlight, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. The garden itself was a work of art, the kind of garden that would make a botanist's heart flutter. Neatly trimmed hedges, beds of vibrant flowers, and a small fountain at the far end of the property, its water sparkling in the sun's rays. Yet, as Miss Marple stepped closer to the heart of the garden, she couldn't shake the sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air. The peacefulness was almost too perfect. It was as if the entire estate had been frozen in time. A gentle breeze ruffled the leaves, and as Miss Marple walked along the cobbled path, she noticed a figure approaching, a woman of grace and poise, her dark dress fluttering in the breeze. The woman had an air of quiet elegance, yet there was something about her that made Miss Marple pause for a moment, her sharp eyes studying the woman carefully. "Miss Marple?" the woman called, her voice soft but tinged with a trace of uncertainty. "You received my letter?" "Yes, indeed," Miss Marple replied, her voice warm yet measured. "It seems that I have come at the right time. You must be Miss Ashford." The woman nodded, her eyes betraying a flicker of emotion, perhaps apprehension Or something else, something hidden beneath the surface? "I'm Evelyn Ashford," she said, stepping closer. "I've been taking care of the manor for years, but recently things have changed. It's as if the garden itself holds a secret, a puzzle, one that even I have been unable to solve." Miss Marple studied Evelyn carefully. Her posture was straight, her face calm, but Miss Marple noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened around the edges of her shawl. It was a subtle giveaway that there was more to the story than Evelyn was letting on. "Shall we begin then?" Miss Marple asked, her voice a gentle invitation to explore the mystery ahead. Evelyn led her through the garden, each step taking them deeper into the heart of the estate. The path was quiet, the only sounds being the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet and the distant song of a bird. It was a peaceful walk, but Miss Marple felt the weight of something heavy in the air, something waiting to be uncovered. The garden, though lovely, felt almost suffocating in its stillness. The roses, vibrant as they were, seemed to whisper secrets that Miss Marple could not quite hear, yet she knew were there. As they approached the centre of the garden, Evelyn stopped before a large stone bench. It was ancient, weathered by the years, yet it stood solid and unwavering. The maze-like hedges around them formed an intricate pattern, twisting and turning in ways that Miss Marple could not immediately decipher. It was a labyrinth, not just of plants, but of something far deeper. "This is where it all started," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though afraid to disturb the stillness around them. The garden was always beautiful, always orderly. But recently, the pattern has begun to change. Something is not right. I have tried to understand it, but I simply cannot. Miss Marple studied the hedges with a keen eye, tracing the lines of the maze with her gaze. There was something peculiar about the way the paths were laid out, something that didn't seem to follow any ordinary design. The symmetry was too perfect, the angles too precise. It was as if the garden itself was trying to communicate something, trying to guide them toward a hidden truth. "It's a puzzle," Miss Marple murmured, "but not one of simple shapes and lines. This is something more complex. The garden itself is trying to tell us something." Evelyn nodded, her expression growing even more serious. "I've thought the same. But where do we begin? How do we solve it?" Miss Marple's gaze shifted to the bench and she noticed something she hadn't before. The stone seemed to have an odd, smooth surface, as if it had been worn down by time. It wasn't just the bench, though. The stones around it, the paths they walked, all had a pattern that seemed deliberate. Miss Marple's sharp mind whirred, but the solution was elusive. Her eyes lingered on a rose bush to the side of the bench, its vibrant petals seemingly glowing under the sunlight. She bent down slightly, inspecting the flowers, when Evelyn suddenly spoke again, her voice tinged with quiet urgency. "Miss Marple, there's something else. Something I didn't tell you in the letter. The garden isn't just a puzzle. It's been here for centuries. But recently strange things have started to happen. People have reported hearing voices, strange whispers in the wind, and others claim that the garden seems to change overnight." The words hung in the air, thick with a sense of dread. Miss Marple paused, taking in the weight of what Evelyn had said. Voices, whispers in the wind. That was no ordinary garden mystery. This was something far more mysterious, and it wasn't just about a few misplaced flowers or a misplaced hedge. The garden seemed to be alive, shifting, moving in ways that no one understood. Miss Marple stood in silence for a moment, her fingers lightly brushing the stone bench. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying with it a faint, almost inaudible sound, a whisper that seemed to speak her name. "Shall we investigate further?" Miss Marple asked softly, her voice calm, yet determined. Evelyn hesitated but then nodded. "Yes, of course we must. I don't know who else to turn to." And with that, Miss Marple began her careful examination of the garden, her every step purposeful, her mind already piecing together the puzzle that had eluded so many. There was something strange at work here, something far deeper than any ordinary garden could hold. Yet Miss Marple knew that beneath the surface of this serene and beautiful place, the secret would be found, if she could only see the clues for what they truly were. Chapter 3. The first clue. The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, bathing Rosewood Manor in a warm, golden light. The garden, which had been so still the previous day, now seemed to come alive with soft rustlings, the leaves trembling in the cool breeze, and the distant call of a bird or two. It was a peaceful scene, yet there lingered a sense of something forgotten, something hidden just beneath the surface. Miss Marple, though, was not one to be swayed by the idyllic tranquility around her. Her mind was sharp, her eyes ever watchful, as she prepared to delve deeper into the mystery of the garden. She sat on the stone bench once more, her fingers gently brushing the cool stone beneath her. The bench, though weathered by time, seemed to hold a certain weight, a weight that suggested it had been here far longer than anyone could remember. Around her, the roses bloomed with reckless abandon, their fragrance sweet in the air. Yet there was something about the arrangement of the flowers that felt deliberate. It was as though they were part of a puzzle, each bloom, each petal, placed with the utmost care. Evelyn Ashford stood nearby, watching Miss Marple intently. She seemed slightly out of place in the stillness of the morning, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Miss Marple could sense the tension in her, the quiet anxiety that bubbled just beneath her composed exterior. Evelyn, it seemed, was waiting for something, though Miss Marple wasn't entirely sure what. "You mentioned that the pattern of the garden has changed recently," Miss Marple said, her voice calm and soothing. "Could you tell me more about that?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting toward the path that wound through the maze of hedges. "At first, I thought it was my imagination," she said softly. "But the more I looked, the more I realized that the hedges, the flowers even, they're all arranged in a way that doesn't seem natural, almost as if someone, something, has been moving them around. And at night, there are sounds, whispers that come from the garden, as though it has a life of its own." Miss Marple looked at her for a moment, considering her words carefully. "Whispers," she murmured. "That is indeed curious and troubling." She stood and took a slow, deliberate walk toward the largest rose bush, her eyes scanning the garden for any further clues. As she moved, the soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet was the only sound that broke the silence. The garden seemed to hold its breath as Miss Marple approached the flowers. The roses were lush and vibrant, their colours rich and inviting, but it was the arrangement of the thorns that caught Miss Marple's attention. Each rose bush seemed to have a particularly sharp thorn standing out, almost as if they were pointed in a certain direction. Miss Marple bent down, her keen eyes tracing the pattern formed by the thorns. She could not help but feel that they were speaking to her. was something deliberate in their positioning. Evelyn, standing at a distance, shifted nervously. "Do you see something, Miss Marple?" "I believe so," Miss Marple replied, her voice soft but purposeful. "I've seen this before, though not in a garden. Patterns like these, they are meant to direct the eye, but more importantly, they are meant to direct the mind." Evelyn watched as Miss Marple carefully moved along the bushes, her fingers lightly touching the petals of the roses, the thorns, the leaves. She seemed to be following some invisible thread, unraveling the mystery in ways Evelyn couldn't quite understand. Suddenly, Miss Marple stopped, her hand hovering over one of the thorns. "Here," she said quietly. "This is it. This is the key." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "The key? What do you mean?" Miss Marple didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took out a small magnifying glass from her pocket, bending down to examine the thorn more closely. It was as sharp as the others, but there was something different about it, something that suggested it wasn't merely part of the bush. It was too deliberate, too precise. With a gentle tug, Miss Marple removed the thorn. Beneath it, hidden in the soft earth, was something that shimmered faintly in the light. It was a small, smooth stone, round, almost polished, and oddly out of place among the rough gravel and dirt of the garden. Miss Marple carefully picked it up, turning it over in her hand. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the stone itself. It was unmarked, smooth, and the colour of pale amber. But as she held it, she felt a strange, almost magnetic pull toward it, as though it contained more than just its physical form. "This is the clue," Miss Marple said, her voice low but filled with certainty. "A stone hidden beneath a thorn. A symbol of protection, of secrets kept. But why here? And why now?" Evelyn was silent for a long moment, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But what does it mean? What do we do with it?" Miss Marple turned the stone over in her hand once more, her brow furrowing in thought. "I don't know yet. But this, Evelyn, is not just a clue. It's a message. Someone has gone to great lengths to hide it, and I suspect this garden holds far more than we can see at first glance." The air around them seemed to thicken with tension, and yet there was something comforting in Miss Marple's calm presence. She knew that the answer was out there, waiting to be found. Her mind was already working, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. As the two of them stood there in the heart of the garden, a breeze stirred, ruffling the leaves and making the roses sway gently. The sound of the rustling petals felt like a whisper, the faintest suggestion of something more, a message hidden within the garden's very breath. Miss Marple stood up, tucking the stone into her pocket. "I believe we have only just begun, Evelyn. And I have a feeling this stone will lead us to more answers." As they turned to leave the rosebush, the garden seemed to shift once again, as though it had been waiting for this moment, for Miss Marple to discover the first clue. The whispers of the wind grew louder, more distinct, as if the garden itself was aware of the progress they had made. But whether the garden would reveal its secrets fully, or whether Miss Marple would have to follow every clue to the bitter end, remained to be seen. Chapter 4. The Rose Pattern. The sun had risen high above Rosewood Manor, casting warm golden rays across the garden as Miss Marple stood still, the stone bench still warm beneath her hands. She hadn't moved much since discovering the first clue, a small stone hidden beneath the thorn of a rose bush. Yet in the peaceful silence of the garden, where the soft murmur of the fountain was the only sound, Miss Marple's mind was racing. discovery had shaken something deep within her. There was something so deliberate about the placement of the stone, about the thorns and the garden itself. Something that didn't sit right. As she turned the smooth amber stone over in her palm, she could feel its weight, its meaning, still hidden, but definitely important. "I have a feeling," Miss Marple murmured quietly, more to herself than to Evelyn, who stood a few paces behind her, watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "This garden is far more than a simple maze of roses and hedges. There's a purpose here, a pattern that has been designed, but I'm not yet sure by whom. Or for what." Evelyn nodded, her brow furrowed. "Do you think it's the work of the previous owner of the manor?" Miss Marple paused for a moment, her mind clicking through the possibilities. She knew nothing about the manor's history yet, but she could feel that the garden's mystery was not just about the plants or the stone. It was something deeper, something that transcended the physical world around them. "I don't know," she said, her voice soft yet filled with quiet conviction. "But I do know that we need to understand the layout of this garden. The roses, the hedges, the stones, they're all connected. We need to focus on the arrangement, Evelyn. There's a clue here. It's in the way the plants grow, in the pattern they form." Evelyn, still unsure of what exactly Miss Marple was suggesting, simply followed her lead. Together they began to walk slowly around the garden once again, this time with a new sense of purpose. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the rows of roses carefully, taking in their placement, their variety, and most importantly, the way each one seemed to be arranged in a certain rhythm. The path curved gently ahead, leading them past rows of vibrant rose bushes, their colours a mix of ruby reds, pale pinks, and deep whites. The scent of the roses was overpowering, a soothing fragrance that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. And yet, despite the calming atmosphere, Miss Marple could feel her heart quickening with every step she took. Something about the roses, more specifically the way they were placed, was too perfect, too intentional. "Look here, Evelyn," Miss Marple said, pointing to a section of the garden where the rose bushes seemed to be arranged in an odd pattern. "Do you see it? The roses are not simply scattered randomly. They follow a line, a curve even, almost as though the arrangement is not just ornamental." Evelyn stepped closer and looked down. At first glance, the roses seemed like a simple, beautiful part of the garden. But as her eyes followed Miss Marple's finger, she began to notice the subtle curve in the line. There was something geometrical about it, something that looked deliberate and almost unnatural. Miss Marple bent down closer to the earth, examining the ground beneath the roses. Her sharp eyes caught a faint line etched into the soil just beneath the leaves. It was barely visible, but there it was, an almost imperceptible line winding around the rose bushes in a spiral pattern. "This," Miss Marple murmured, "this is the pattern. A spiral. Not just any spiral, but one that seems to lead toward the centre of the garden." Evelyn took a step back, her breath catching. What does it mean? Is it some kind of message? Miss Marple stood straight again, eyes thoughtful. A spiral, Evelyn, is a powerful symbol. It represents cycles, growth and transformation. But more than that, it's a path, a way to lead us somewhere. I believe this spiral is guiding us. Miss Marple's gaze flicked to the centre of the garden, where the fountain bubbled softly, the water creating small ripples that expanded outward. The spiral seemed to curve toward it, but there was something unsettling about the symmetry. The closer they got to the fountain, the more it felt as if the garden were wrapping itself around them, pulling them toward a conclusion that was both inevitable and mysterious. "Let's follow the spiral," Miss Marple said, her voice calm, but with a newfound urgency in her tone. "It will lead us to what we need to find." As they walked along the spiral, Miss Marple felt the air grow heavier, thicker with tension. The gentle rustle of the leaves seemed louder now, the stillness of the garden suddenly filled with an oppressive silence that seemed to press in on them. The spiral twisted and turned, winding around the rose bushes, until they reached the very heart of the garden, the fountain. The fountain, once a serene feature of the garden, now appeared ominous, its water shimmering in the sunlight like something hidden beneath its surface. Miss Marple stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she took in the fountain's shape. It was beautiful, yes, but the way it sat in the center of the spiral garden gave it an almost unnatural air. Something about its position seemed too perfect, too precise. She knelt down beside the fountain and traced her fingers along the stone edge. As she did, she felt a small hidden latch beneath the water's surface. With a quiet but deliberate motion, Miss Marple lifted the latch, revealing a hidden compartment below the fountain. Evelyn gasped as Miss Marple pulled a small weathered box from the compartment. It was old, its surface worn smooth by years of neglect, and yet there was a sense of anticipation in the air as Miss Marple held it in her hands. "This," Miss Marple said softly, "this is the next piece of the puzzle." Evelyn looked at her with wide eyes. "What is it? What does it mean?" Miss Marple smiled, though her expression was one of quiet satisfaction. "It means we are closer now, Evelyn. The garden has given us its first clue, and it has led us here. But this box, I suspect, holds something far more significant, something that will unlock the next part of our mystery." As Miss Marple gently opened the box, the soft breeze seemed to pause, holding its breath. The garden was still once more. The spiral had led them here, and whatever lay within the box would be the key to understanding the garden's secret. Chapter 5. A Hidden Message. The garden of Rosewood Manor had transformed in the early hours of the morning. The dew still clung to the petals of the roses, and the air, though crisp, held a touch of warmth from the sun slowly rising in the sky. The peaceful beauty of the garden was undeniable, but Miss Marple could not shake the nagging sensation that the true nature of the place was far from ordinary. A mystery, buried deep within the earth of the manor's grounds, was steadily revealing itself to her. The spiral, the roses, the hidden stone beneath the thorns, they were all parts of a larger puzzle, one that she could now feel in her very bones. She stood beside the fountain, the small weathered box she had uncovered still resting gently in her hands. Evelyn Ashford stood a little farther back, watching with a mix of awe and trepidation. The stone bench nearby, the one that had been a silent witness to their discovery, now seemed strangely inviting, as though it too had been waiting for them to unlock the next step in the mystery. Miss Marple paused for a moment, looking down at the box. The delicate carvings on its surface had faded with age, but there was something timeless about it, a hint of the past pressing upon the present. Carefully, she lifted the box's lid, the faint creak of the wood adding to the weight of the moment. For a heartbeat, everything in the garden seemed to still, as though the world itself was waiting for what Miss Marple would find inside. Inside the box lay a rolled parchment, tied neatly with a faded ribbon. Miss Marple's fingers trembled ever so slightly as she reached for it, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. There was no mistaking it. The garden had offered its first true clue, and this parchment was the key to unlocking its secret. As she untied the ribbon and unfurled the parchment, the air around them grew even quieter. The morning's light softened, casting a golden glow on the paper. The words, though written in a fine looping hand, were easy to read. The ink, though slightly faded, still held a certain vibrancy. And as Miss Marple read aloud, her voice soft but certain, the words seemed to resonate through the garden, echoing in the stillness. Beneath the surface where time halts, lies the key to the next step. Trust the stone and follow the path unseen. Evelyn's breath caught as she listened. What does it mean, Miss Marple? Beneath the surface. What could it be referring to? Miss Marple remained silent for a long moment, her sharp eyes scanning the garden once more. She looked at the fountain, its water sparkling in the sun, its surface calm and still. But there was something more to it than just a simple feature of the garden. It had been the focal point of the spiral, and it seemed to draw them in now with a deeper force. The key, Miss Marple murmured, her voice almost lost in the breeze, is not just hidden in the flowers or the roses. It is something deeper. Something beneath our feet. The garden, Evelyn, is a place that holds secrets beneath its surface, literally and figuratively. Evelyn's eyes widened, and she looked at Miss Marple in confusion. You mean, beneath the garden itself? Miss Marple nodded slowly, her gaze now locked on the fountain. Indeed, the stone. It may not be just the stone we've found. It may be referring to something else, something buried deeper. The fountain, with its calm waters and perfectly still surface, hides something more. Beneath the surface lies the key to what we must uncover next. Miss Marple stepped forward, the soft earth beneath her shoes giving way with every step. Evelyn, hesitant but curious, followed closely behind. The water in the fountain still rippled ever so slightly, the sound of it falling into the basin a quiet lullaby in the background. Reaching the fountain's edge, Miss Marple knelt down, her hand gently tracing the stone surface. Her fingers brushed the cool, smooth texture of the stone, feeling for any clue hidden within its grooves. The coolness of the water seemed to reach up and beckon her. Suddenly, her fingers stopped. There, just beneath the waterline, a faint marking appeared. At first it was nothing more than a subtle indentation, but as Miss Marple pressed her hand against it, she could feel something give way, something hidden just below the surface. Evelyn's breath caught. Miss Marple, what is it? Miss Marple didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing as she carefully examined the fountain's stonework. With a steady hand, she pressed harder against the indentation. Slowly, the stone shifted, and with a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open in the base of the fountain. Evelyn gasped, stepping forward, but Miss Marple held up a hand, signalling her to stay back. There was no rush. The garden had waited for this moment for far longer than they had. Inside the compartment was a small, intricately carved box. It was not the same as the one they had found earlier, but it was similar in design. Ancient and weathered, yet clearly crafted with great care. Miss Marple lifted the box out gently, her fingers moving delicately along its surface. Another clue. Miss Marple
Marple. What does it mean? Miss Marple hesitated for a moment, her fingers resting on the delicate clasp of the box. It was as though the very act of opening it would bring them closer to the heart of the mystery. But she was no stranger to the subtle art of patience. "We must be careful," she said, her voice steady but tinged with an unspoken excitement. "Whatever lies inside this box may hold the final pieces of the puzzle, but it will also require us to see beyond the surface, to
understand the garden and its secrets in ways we have not yet considered." With that, Miss Marple slowly opened the box. Chapter 6. Beneath the bench. The early morning mist still clung to the corners of Rosewood Manor's garden, casting everything in a soft, ethereal glow. The fountain bubbled quietly, its water shimmering in the gentle light, and the roses bloomed vibrantly against the backdrop of the grey stone walls. Yet, despite the outward calm of the garden, Miss Marple could not shake the growing feeling that the mystery was far from over. Every discovery, every clue, led her further into the heart of something ancient, something hidden beneath the seemingly tranquil surface. Miss Marple stood near the stone bench, her eyes narrowing as she looked at it once again. The bench, though simple, seemed almost too prominent in the middle of the garden, too perfectly placed. Its weathered surface and aged stone seemed to whisper of long-forgotten secrets, hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be uncovered. She had already sensed that there was something significant about this bench, something beyond its role as a quiet place for garden visitors to rest. Turning to Evelyn, who had been waiting quietly nearby, Miss Marple spoke in her usual calm voice. "The bench, Evelyn," she said, her tone contemplative. "It's not just a resting place. It's part of the puzzle. There's something beneath it, something that's been overlooked for far too long." Evelyn's expression flickered with confusion. "Beneath the bench?" "But Miss Marple, it's just a bench. Why would there be anything hidden there?" Miss Marple smiled softly, her eyes fixed on the stone seat. "That's exactly what we need to figure out, Evelyn. The garden has been a guide, but we're not simply following a path laid out for us. We must be willing to question what we see. The bench is more than just a place to sit." Without waiting for a response, Miss Marple moved closer to the bench, her steps deliberate and measured. The morning light reflected off the smooth surface of the stone, but as she crouched to inspect it more closely, she noticed a subtle shift in the texture of the stone that hadn't been visible before. It wasn't an obvious crack or imperfection, but rather a faint groove in the stone at the very base of the bench, as if someone had intentionally marked it. She ran her fingers over the groove, feeling the subtle indentation in the stone. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but her intuition told her it was there for a reason. Her fingers traced along the line, and as she did, the stone seemed to shift slightly, just enough for Miss Marple to hear a soft click. Evelyn, who had been standing a few feet away, gasped softly. "Did you hear that?" "What happened?" Miss Marple looked up from her examination, a small smile playing on her lips. "I believe," she said gently, "we've found our next clue." Slowly she applied a little more pressure, and to Evelyn's astonishment, the base of the bench began to slide open, revealing a hidden compartment. Beneath it, the sound was faint but distinct, a soft grinding of stone against stone. Miss Marple's fingers worked carefully, pulling the secret compartment wide open. Inside, nestled beneath layers of dust and time, was an old weathered chest. It was small, no larger than a shoebox, but its presence was undeniably important. The chest's surface was carved with intricate patterns, resembling the very same rose motifs that adorned the garden itself. The detail was astonishing, though faded by the passage of time. The chest seemed to belong to the garden, as though it had always been there, waiting to be found. Evelyn approached slowly, her footsteps hesitant. What do you think is inside, Miss Marple?" Miss Marple didn't respond immediately. She was staring at the chest, her mind whirring with possibilities. The patterns carved into its surface seemed familiar, almost as if she had seen them before, perhaps on another part of the garden. The garden had been deliberately designed, each element placed with careful intention. And now, this chest, hidden beneath a bench in the very heart of the garden, seemed to hold the next piece of the puzzle. With the gentleness of a practiced hand, Miss Marple opened the chest. Inside there was a small folded parchment, but unlike the last one, this paper was much older, its edges worn and yellowed with time. The ink was faded, though still legible. Miss Marple carefully unfolded the parchment, her fingers lightly trembling with the anticipation of what it might say. The words, though written in an old-fashioned script, were clear. "The garden remembers what has been lost. Follow the rose that stands alone, for it holds the key to the next passage." Miss Marple's heart quickened slightly. The garden remembers what has been lost. What a curious phrase. There was a sense of finality in the words, as though they were the last words of someone who had left behind a legacy to be uncovered, piece by piece. She stood up slowly, her eyes sweeping across the garden, as if trying to piece together the meaning of the message. "The rose that stands alone," she murmured. It must refer to a specific rose within the garden, one that is isolated from the others. Evelyn's eyes widened in understanding. "Do you think the rose could be a clue?" "I do," Miss Marple said with quiet certainty. "But we must be careful. The garden has already led us in several directions. Each clue has brought us closer, but there's still more to uncover." The air around them seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Miss Marple turned and looked back at the garden, her mind already working through the possibilities. The lone rose, the one that stood apart from the others, was the key to the next step. But where was it? What did it look like? Her eyes darted across the rows of roses, scanning for the solitary bloom that would hold the next piece of the puzzle. The tension in the air was palpable. Everything seemed to hang in the balance, the next discovery waiting just out of reach. Finally, her gaze fell upon a small cluster of roses in the far corner of the garden. There, standing apart from the others, was a single rose, its petals dark and redder than the others around it. It stood tall and proud, surrounded by a sea of smaller, paler blooms. It was a striking contrast to the rest, almost as if it were meant to be noticed. Miss Marple stepped forward, her footsteps measured and deliberate. "This," she said softly, "must be the one. The rose that stands alone." Chapter 7. The Search for the Key. The early afternoon light cast long, slanted shadows across the garden at Rosewood Manor. The once silent air now seemed alive with the hum of unseen energy, as if the garden itself was aware of the growing mystery unfolding within its borders. The gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the distant murmur of the fountain, and the soft scent of roses, everything was soothingly familiar. Yet Miss Marple could feel the tension creeping under the surface, a quiet urgency, as though the garden was holding its breath. She stood still, her eyes fixed on the solitary rose that had captured her attention, the one described in the hidden parchment. Follow the rose that stands alone. It stood proud, its deep red petals almost glowing against the sea of paler flowers. The rose seemed to beckon her forward, but Miss Marple knew better than to rush headlong into a mystery without first considering the significance of every small detail. "Evelyn," Miss Marple said, her voice as calm as ever, yet with an underlying note of focus. "This rose is the key. It stands apart from all the others, but there's something more to it. The question is, what does this rose represent? What are we meant to discover here?" Evelyn, who had been watching Miss Marple with quiet curiosity, stepped closer, her brow furrowing. "It's beautiful, but why would it be so important? Surely there must be many roses like it." Miss Marple didn't take her eyes off the flower. "It's not about the rose itself, Evelyn, but what it symbolizes. It's isolated, separated from the rest of the garden. It is the rose in this entire space that refuses to be a part of the whole. There's a message in its singularity. We must look deeper." Evelyn stood in silence for a moment, her gaze lingering on the flower, but her mind clearly racing. The garden had shown them time and time again that nothing was as it seemed. Every step they had taken, every puzzle they had solved, had brought them closer to a truth that was both unsettling and revealing. Miss Marple continued to study the lone rose, feeling an odd mixture of calm and anticipation. Her instincts told her that this rose, though beautiful and quiet, held the key to unlocking the garden's secrets. Yet it wasn't just the rose itself that was important, it was the path she was meant to follow from here. Slowly, Miss Marple bent down, examining the ground around the flower. The soil was soft and dark, the earth rich with life, yet something felt different about this particular spot. She gently pressed her hand against the ground, feeling for any clues, any subtle signs of a hidden mechanism. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and cold beneath the dirt. With a soft gasp, she dug a little deeper, uncovering a small metal latch, rusted with age but still functional. It was hidden so well beneath the rose that it would have gone unnoticed by anyone who didn't. Nowhere to look. Evelyn, who had been watching in silence, gasped. "Is that another compartment?" Miss Marple nodded, her face unreadable. "It appears so. A hidden latch beneath the rose. The garden continues to surprise us." Miss Marple carefully pried open the latch, her movements deliberate. As she did, the ground shifted slightly, and with a soft, almost imperceptible groan, a stone panel slid open, revealing yet another hidden compartment beneath the rose bush. The tension in the air deepened as Miss Marple reached inside, her fingers brushing against something cool and metallic. Inside, she found a small, ornate key, a key that shimmered with a dull, faded luster. The key's intricate design matched the motifs found on the chest and the carvings in the garden. It seemed as though this key had been waiting for them, hidden just beneath the surface of the garden's beauty. For a moment, Miss Marple simply held the key in her hand, examining it carefully. Its weight was significant, almost as if it were more than just an object, but a symbol of the final step in a long, carefully laid plan. It was clear that this was no ordinary key. It was part of something larger, something that would open the next door in the mystery they had been unravelling. "This," Miss Marple said softly, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. is the key we have been searching for. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes wide with wonder. Do you think it will unlock something important? Miss Marple turned to her, a small smile on her lips. I believe it will unlock the final secret of the garden. The rose led us here, and now the key will lead us to the next part of the puzzle. Evelyn watched Miss Marple closely as she turned the key over in her hands, her mind clearly working through the implications of what had just happened. There was no denying it. Every step they had taken had led them to this moment. The garden had been guiding them, slowly but surely, towards something greater. Without another word, Miss Marple stood, tucking the key safely into her pocket. Let's see where this key takes us. They began to walk back toward the center of the garden, where the fountain had been their point of origin. The garden, though peaceful and still, now felt charged with the promise of something significant just ahead. The path had been laid out for them, each clue more intricate than the last, and with each discovery, the garden seemed to grow more alive. The quiet tension of the moment lingered in the air, and Evelyn couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as they made their way back. What would they find next? The key was only the beginning, but Miss Marple's calm confidence was a steady anchor amidst the rising suspense. Miss Marple's sharp eyes scanned the garden again, her mind working through the possibilities. The key, so carefully hidden beneath the solitary rose, was a reminder of the garden's intricate design. There were no accidents here. Everything, from the roses to the stone bench to the hidden compartments, had been placed with purpose. With each discovery, the tension in the garden grew, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. And as they neared the fountain once more, Miss Marple felt the weight of the next step in the mystery hanging just out of reach. The key was important, but the true revelation was still ahead. Chapter 8. The Fountain's Secret. The garden was bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, its stillness disturbed only by the faint rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. The roses, now in full bloom, seemed to exhale their fragrant perfume into the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the garden itself. It was a serene, almost tranquil scene, one that could lull even the most vigilant observer into a false sense of security. Yet Miss Marple knew better. She had seen the signs, felt the underlying tension that simmered beneath the garden's peaceful exterior. The fountain, so central to the garden's design, was about to reveal its final secret. Miss Marple stood before the fountain, the key she had found in the rose bush now secure in her pocket. Her eyes narrowed, her thoughts moving swiftly as she studied the structure. The fountain had always seemed like a mere decorative feature, beautiful, calming, yet too perfect, too symmetrical to be entirely natural. Now, with the garden's mysteries beginning to unfold, Miss Marple could feel that the fountain was far more than just a source of water. It was the heart of the puzzle, the key to everything that had been hidden. The air around her seemed to grow thicker, heavier, as if the garden itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. The sound of the water cascading down into the basin was hypnotic, a soft, soothing melody that contrasted with the growing sense of anticipation. Miss Marple, ever the observer, didn't let the peaceful atmosphere fool her. There was something beneath this tranquility, something waiting to be discovered. Evelyn, standing a few paces behind, watched Miss Marple intently. She had grown accustomed to the detective's calm, but the way Miss Marple regarded the fountain now seemed different. There was a subtle change in her posture, a shift that indicated she was on the verge of uncovering something significant. "Do you think the fountain holds the final secret, Miss Marple?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the delicate balance of the moment. "I believe it does," Miss Marple replied softly, her gaze never leaving the water. "The fountain has always been the centre of this garden. Everything we've discovered so far has led us back here. It's time we look deeper." For a moment, Miss Marple simply stood, taking in the fountain's design. Its stone basin was carved with intricate patterns, reminiscent of the roses in the garden. But there was something more to the carvings, something Miss Marple hadn't noticed until now. She leaned closer, her eyes tracing the delicate swirls and shapes that adorned the stone. It was as though the fountain itself was speaking, hidden messages etched into the stone. Her fingers gently touched the carvings, following the spirals and curvatures with care. As she traced one particularly delicate swirl, she felt something shift beneath her. Fingertips. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her pause. A hidden mechanism, perhaps. Her heart quickened slightly, and her fingers pressed harder against the stone. With a soft click, a hidden compartment within the fountain opened, revealing a narrow stone cavity beneath the water. Miss Marple's breath caught in her throat, the calm facade of the garden giving way to the tension of the moment. The compartment was deep, shadowed by the ripples of water above, and yet Miss Marple's sharp eyes could see what was inside. At the bottom of the compartment lay a small, ornate box, its surface glinting faintly in the dim light. It was remarkably different from the other clues they had uncovered in the garden. This box seemed more delicate, almost fragile, as if it were a treasure meant to be protected at all costs. Evelyn, who had been watching with wide eyes, took a step forward. "What do you think is inside, Miss Marple?" Miss Marple did not answer immediately. She reached into the compartment, her fingers brushing against the cool stone before gently lifting the box out of its hiding place. The water from the fountain dripped softly around it, but Miss Marple handled it with the utmost care, as though it were something far more valuable than mere treasure. Once the box was in her hands, she stood still for a moment, turning it over slowly. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every curve, every detail meticulously carved. The box was heavy for its size, and the weight of it seemed to carry a deeper significance, as though it held more than just its physical form. "This," Miss Marple said softly, her voice filled with quiet reverence, "is the heart of the puzzle." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Do you think it's the answer to the mystery?" Miss Marple nodded, though her expression remained calm, as if the answer had always been within her grasp. "I believe it is. But we must open it carefully. Whatever is inside will reveal the final pieces of this mystery." With that, Miss Marple set the box down on the stone rim of the fountain, her fingers gently working the clasp. It was old, delicate, and worn, but it opened with ease, as though it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a small, faded parchment. The paper, though fragile, was still legible, and Miss Marple carefully unfolded it. The words, written in the same fine script as the other clues they had found, were clear. "The garden remembers all things. In its heart, the past and present meet, The final truth lies not in what is hidden, but in what is revealed. The rose that stands alone holds the answer you seek. Seek not the stone, but the time. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the message, her mind working swiftly to decipher its meaning. The garden remembers all things. How intriguing. The past and present meet. How deeply symbolic. And then the final phrase. The rose that stands alone holds the answer you seek. Seek not the stone, but the time. The time, Miss Marple murmured softly, more to herself than to Evelyn. The time. This isn't just about the garden, Evelyn. It's about something much older. Something buried in the very soil of Rosewood Manor. Evelyn stood in silence, taking in the weight of Miss Marple's words. What do we do next? She asked, her voice filled with awe and curiosity. Miss Marple stood still for a long moment, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the parchment. Next, Evelyn, she said slowly, we follow the final clue. The rose that stands alone is not just a metaphor. It is a guide. And it is time we uncover what it has been guarding all these years. The air around them seemed to thicken, the quiet beauty of the garden now charged with anticipation. The fountain had given up its secret, but it was clear that the path to the final truth was not yet fully revealed. The puzzle was far from over, but with each clue, the mystery grew ever closer to its resolution. Chapter 9. The Final Unlocking. The late afternoon sun bathed Rosewood Manor's garden in a warm amber light, its rays stretching long across the tranquil expanse. The fountain once again seemed to take centre stage, the water now sparkling with a soft luminescence as it cascaded down into the basin. Miss Marple stood before it, the air thick with the scent of roses and freshly turned earth. Everything about the garden had a peaceful, almost dreamlike quality. Yet beneath the surface, Miss Marple knew, lay the pulse of something deeper, something waiting to be unlocked. The key she had found, nestled beneath the lone rose, felt heavier now. In her pocket, it seemed to hum with purpose, as if it were the final step in solving the mystery that had unfolded piece by piece in the garden. But what exactly would it unlock? What lay behind the next door of this puzzle? Miss Marple turned to Evelyn, who stood silently beside her, eyes wide with anticipation. Evelyn had been with her every step of the way, but the closer they got to the heart of the garden's secret, the more uneasy she seemed. It was as if she could sense that the garden was not simply a beautiful ancient place. It was a living, breathing enigma that had been waiting for the right person to unlock its secrets. "Are you ready, Evelyn?" Miss Marple asked, her voice soft yet filled with quiet resolve. Evelyn swallowed, nodding slowly. "Yes, Miss Marple. But I don't know what to expect. What do you think we'll find?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I can't say for certain, but I believe we're about to uncover the truth. Whatever is hidden here has been waiting for centuries, and we are the ones to finally uncover it." The garden was more than just an array of flowers, paths and hedges. It was a place of secrets, a place where time had left its marks, but had also preserved something precious. The symbols, the roses, the spiral, the lone bloom, had all led them here. The final key was now in Miss Marple's hand, and she could feel the weight of it, as though it carried the answer to everything they had uncovered thus far. Without another word, Miss Marple approached the base of the fountain. She looked at it closely, her eyes tracing the contours of the stone once more. The carvings, the intricate designs that adorned the edges, all seemed to tell a story.
But it wasn't until she felt the smooth, almost imperceptible groove in the stone, a groove she had missed earlier, that she realized what she needed to do. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "the fountain is not just a feature of the garden. It's the gateway. The key must fit here, at the very center of this place." Evelyn's heart raced as she watched Miss Marple move toward the base of the fountain. The key glinted in the fading light, its delicate edges catching the last of the day's warmth. With steady hands, Miss Marple inserted the key into the groove, and with a soft click, the stone shifted. For a moment, nothing happened. The garden seemed to hold its breath, the birds falling silent, the air growing thick with tension. Miss Marple stood still, her fingers lightly gripping the key, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the stone panel before her. Then, slowly, the stone panel began to move, sliding open with a sound that was almost imperceptible. The tension in the air thickened, and Evelyn could only stand in silent awe as the fountain revealed a hidden compartment, dark and mysterious beneath its surface. Inside the compartment, resting on a velvet cushion, lay a final object, a small, intricate box, gold and ornate. The box was not just a container, but a work of art, its surface adorned with symbols and designs that mirrored those found in the garden. It was as though it had been made to fit perfectly into this hidden space, waiting to be discovered by the right person at the right time. Miss Marple reached into the compartment, her fingers brushing lightly against the cool metal of the box. She could feel the energy of the garden swirling around her, its ancient mystery slowly beginning to unravel. The box was the key to everything, she realized. Everything had led to this moment. With a steady hand, Miss Marple lifted the box out of its resting place and turned it over. The weight of it was reassuring, solid, as though it were meant to be in her hands. She looked at Evelyn, who was watching with bated breath. "I believe," Miss Marple said softly, her voice filled with quiet excitement, "that this is the heart of the mystery." Evelyn, her voice trembling with anticipation, asked, "What is inside it? What does it hold?" Miss Marple didn't answer immediately. She was lost in the moment, the final unraveling of a mystery that had taken root in the garden long before they had arrived. The final step, the final secret, was here. She slowly opened the box, her fingers trembling with excitement. Inside, nestled in the velvet lining, was a small scroll of paper, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. The ink was faded but still legible, and as Miss Marple unfurled the parchment, she read the words aloud, her voice steady but filled with awe. "The garden remembers all things. Time bends, but does not forget. What was lost will be found, and what was hidden will be revealed. In the heart of the garden, the past and future meet, and the truth is made clear." Miss Marple paused, her heart pounding with the realization of what she had just read. The garden wasn't simply a collection of flowers and paths. It was a place where time itself converged, where the past and future were intertwined, and where a long-lost truth had finally been uncovered. The puzzle, it seemed, was not just about finding the right physical objects. It was about understanding the deeper meaning behind them. "The garden," Miss Marple murmured, "has been a keeper of history, of memory, of secrets. It has preserved the truth, even as time itself has moved on." Evelyn, wide-eyed and breathless, asked, "But what does this mean? What does the truth reveal?" Miss Marple smiled, her face calm and serene. "It means, Evelyn, that the answer we were seeking was never hidden in the stones or the roses. It was in the garden itself,
in the way it preserved its past. The garden remembers, and now we remember too. She stood, the box and parchment still in her hands, and gazed out at the garden. The wind had picked up slightly, sending ripples through the fountain and rustling the leaves of the trees. The garden was alive, not just with the vibrancy of nature, but with the echoes of history, the whispers of a truth long buried and now finally revealed. As the last light of day faded from the sky, Miss Marple felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The mystery was solved, but in solving it, she had uncovered something far more profound, the timeless nature of memory and truth, and the way they are preserved, even in the most unexpected of places. And with that, the final chapter of the garden story was written. Chapter 10. The Timeless Secret. As dusk fell over Rosewood Manor, the garden transformed before Miss Marple's eyes. The once golden light of day now turned to deep shades of purple and blue, casting long shadows across the stone paths and the perfectly manicured rose bushes. The air was cooler, the breeze more pronounced, but still the garden held its peaceful rhythm. The faint chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the wind added to the calm atmosphere. But despite the tranquility, Miss Marple could feel the undeniable weight of the moment pressing in. They had reached the end of the garden's mystery, and yet she could sense that what they had uncovered was more than just a secret of the earth. It was a revelation that spanned time itself. The box, the one that had held the faded parchment, was still in her hands. She had not let it go since the final clue had been revealed. Each step of the puzzle had led them here, and now they stood at the precipice of its meaning. The garden had always been more than just a collection of flowers, more than just an arrangement of stones and paths. It was a living testament to something deeper, a hidden truth that Miss Marple had now uncovered. Evelyn, who had been standing quietly beside her, seemed to be in awe, her eyes wide with wonder as she looked at Miss Marple. "So, what does it all mean?" she asked softly. Her voice was filled with both excitement and trepidation, as if the secret of the garden was a force too powerful to fully grasp. Miss Marple turned to face her, her expression serene but filled with a quiet knowing. "It means, Evelyn, that this garden has been a keeper of time, a place where the past and present converge, where memory is preserved even as the world moves on. We were not just uncovering clues hidden in the earth. We were uncovering the garden's truth, that it remembers." Evelyn, though she had followed Miss Marple through every step of the journey, seemed to be struggling to fully understand. "The garden remembers. How is that possible?" Miss Marple smiled gently. "It's not the garden itself, Evelyn, but the people who tended it, the memories they left behind. Time bends in strange ways here. This garden has become a monument to the past, a living history that reflects not just the years, but the essence of everything that came before." As Miss Marple stood there, the weight of the words settled over the garden like a quiet fog. The beauty of the roses, the soft gurgling of the fountain, the warmth of the evening sun, they all seemed to fade into the background as the full scope of what she had discovered became clear. The garden, in its tranquility, had been holding its secret for far longer than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just about the flowers or the paths. It was about the memories woven into the fabric of the land itself. Those memories had remained hidden, waiting for someone like Miss Marple to come along and unearth them. Miss Marple looked down at the parchment once more. The words were simple, but their meaning had been profound. The garden remembers all things. Time bends, but does not forget. And in that moment, Miss Marple realized that it was never the stone bench, the roses, or the intricate carvings that had held the most important clues. It was the timeless nature of the garden, the way it had preserved the past within its walls, waiting for the right person to see it. She turned her gaze toward the center of the garden, where the fountain stood still and silent, reflecting the dimming light of the sky. It was as though the garden itself had been preparing for this very moment. Every rose, every stone, every path had been placed with purpose, and now the final secret had been revealed. "We were meant to find this," Miss Marple said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "The garden has been here for centuries, keeping the memories of all who came before." The key to understanding it all wasn't in the puzzle, it was in the time itself. The garden remembers the lives, the stories, the whispers of the past. It holds the truth, just as the earth holds its seeds, waiting for the right time to bloom. Evelyn seemed to understand now, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of wonder as she looked at the fountain. So the mystery wasn't just about what was hidden beneath the garden. It was about the garden's history itself. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes distant for a moment as if she too was feeling the weight of the garden's timeless presence. Yes, the garden holds the essence of all that has passed. It remembers the past, the people who once walked here, and the secrets they left behind. What we've uncovered is not just a garden, it's a living memory of everything that came before us. And now, we are a part of that story. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, and for a moment, the garden seemed to exhale, as though it too had been waiting for this revelation. The last light of the day filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the paths. Miss Marple stood still, allowing the weight of the moment to sink in. The puzzle was complete. The mystery had been solved. But the garden, this ancient living testament, held more than just the secrets of the past. It held the key to understanding time itself. As the evening deepened, the first stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling faintly above the manor. The garden, its secret finally unveiled, seemed to settle into a quiet peace. The mystery of Rosewood Manor had been solved, but its story, like the garden itself, would continue to live on in the memory of those who had uncovered it. Miss Marple stood in silence for a moment longer, her gaze lifting to the night sky. "Time bends, Evelyn, but it does not forget, and neither will this garden." Evelyn looked around at the garden, her heart filled with a sense of reverence. "It's beautiful, Miss Marple. I think I understand." "Now," Miss Marple smiled gently, her eyes twinkling in the dim light. "Sometimes, Evelyn, the greatest mysteries are the ones that teach us about the passage of time. And in a place like this, time becomes a part of us all." The garden, in its quiet beauty, had kept its secret for so long. And now, as the night embraced Rosewood Manor, its story had been told. The puzzle was complete, the final clue uncovered, and the timeless truth of the garden had been revealed.